Uh, Good day, afternoon, morning, wherever in the world you are, and welcome to this month's NetApp on NetApp Partner webinar. I am joined today with Rajesh Shriyan, who's our Senior Director of Enterprise Architecture. And Rajesh, I will go ahead and turn it over to you. Just ask that if you have questions, include them in the chat, and we're ready to get started.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Mark. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. I believe I talked to this audience about a year and a half ago on our cloud journey. Since then, a lot of things have changed. So I thought it will be good to provide a refresher back and at the same time talk about where we are in terms of our journey. And for those who couldn't attend last time or new, a quick introduction about myself. So been with NetApp about 11 years now. And currently, my key focus is around enterprise architecture, which involves figuring out the strategy, the roadmap for IT in general. Along with that, I'm also responsible for data and analytics and then integration. And as part of this, we get involved in very complex conversations with our CIO and our business SVPs and EVPs around figuring out the business strategy and then translating that business strategy into IT strategy and roadmap to enable those business strategies. So that's where we spend a lot of our time on. So we have a very well view of what's happening in the industry, what's happening with the business, what's happening with NetApp business in general, and then the technology trend that's associated with that one. So that's pretty much what we do. I'm supported here by two of my team members, Paul, who is driving our cloud strategy right now at NetApp, execution aspect of cloud strategy, and Praveen, who is our key enterprise architect. And he is our technical guy. So any kind of questions around product and product discussion, he is the best guy who can respond to any questions real time, or you can follow up via email with him too. So with that, the key goal for me is to share with our big partner audience around what is NetApp's cloud strategy, why are we even talking about cloud strategy, what is the need for cloud, and how cloud is instrumental for us for pivoting inside NetApp, and what are some of the technologies and platforms that we are evaluating in achieving our cloud strategy, right? So I think that's pretty much the intent. And what I will do is that after every one or two slides, I'll pause for any question. So either you can ask real time or you can post it on chat, and then we can just try to respond to the question. So before we start talking about cloud, I think the key question is, why are we talking about cloud and what is this transformation that everyone talks about, right? So if you go and attend any Gartner, Forrester conferences, everyone is talking about digital transformation, right? So I think it's very interesting terminology, and it means different things for different set of customers. For a mom and pop shop, digital transformation means taking day-to-day manual activities that they're performing and digitizing it. For companies like NetApp, which has been on the digital transformation, aka digitizing the manual workflow, for us, the digital transformation means now a lot more optimization and agility and speed. Those are the kind of things that we think about when we talk about digital transformation. So this is true for a lot of high-tech companies. When they talk about digital transformation, like Cisco's and Juniper and so on, they are talking about the next evolution around optimization and agility. So I think it's very important for you guys, as you engage the customers, be aware of the maturity of the customer that you're talking to. And based upon that, I think you can deploy different skills and solutions to meet the requirement. I talked about the companies like us. What does digital transformation mean? One of the aspect is faster go-to-market, which is the agility angle, and rapid deployment of new capabilities, right? So for example, as we announce new offerings at Insight, a lot of those new offering needs to be operationalized inside IT, right? Ability for us to sell, ability for us to recognize the revenue, ability for us to figure out how to target the customers. So those are some of the capabilities that IT has to enable, so that way NetApp business and engineering team can go and sell the product. So what's happening now is that the way rapidly the business is evolving, you need certain capabilities to get there faster, right? So that's what we mean by faster go to market. And the other aspect is, in general for IT, the focus is around keeping the solutions as vanilla as possible, so that way we are not keep on modifying it and creating a lot of UAT and other kind of complex dependencies, and thereby prolonging the release of capabilities, right? And before I talk in a little more detail, some of these problem statements that I've captured here is very much applicable for an IT function, right? So I want to put caveat saying that most of my presentation today is focused around how you as NetApp partners, when you target an organization, this is the pitch for the CIOs, right? So if you take any enterprises, so there is product team, and then there is quote unquote operations team. And the CIO falls sort of in that operations team. And a lot of these problem statements are centered around that. If you're trying to target an engineering leader, someone like an Octavian of the world, the Ronans of the world, their problem statements are a little bit different as compared to what we're trying to solve, right? So that's the context. Now getting back on the business driver. So those are the reasons why we are looking at cloud and why we want to transform. Then while that's happening, what we are realizing is more and more the business leaders, they are dependent upon data to make business decisions. What we mean by that is, whether you call it as AI and ML, or you can call it as advanced analytics. Essentially, the business is now getting more and more savvy, where they're saying, we've been generating this data as part of digital transformation for the last decade or so. How can I tap into that data so that way I can make the right decision? For example, looking at how many people attended insights and coming up with targeted campaign for those potential leads, or for that matter, existing leads, taking our AIQ data and other intelligent data and connecting it all together and making the targeted approach for our customer is a great example of an advanced analytics. So those are the kind of capabilities that we are noticing more and more is being asked by the business leaders, including the NetApp business leaders. So that's another big transformation that's happening. And I'll talk about why cloud in that context. Then on the other side of the spectrum, a typical CIO, they are measured based upon how fast you're delivering the business capabilities, how are you managing your IT operations efficiently, right? Which involves cost optimization and looking at your spend models and so on, and how you're able to meet with the elastic demands. Today, we are rolling out a new capability. We are not expecting a lot of demand on our infrastructure, but as we start doing more campaigns, as we start getting more traction, we want the IT capacity to increase at the same scale. Some of these demands are and architectures are very difficult to build and expensive on-prem. This is where the cloud and the cloud elasticity comes in to get you to that kind of scale. So these are the kind of things the CIOs worry about. And then the other aspect is we are not the whole world doesn't center around North Americas, right? So we have all the geos, and there's a lot of demand, and there's a lot of new business models coming around geos. And what that means is that we in IT needs to build an architecture that meets the geo's needs, right? Whether it be PII, CII kind of ask and or the scaling ask. So when you look across all these different aspects, right, the rapid business transformation, the need for AI, and all these efficiencies and expectations for the CIO, what's one common thing that we are that's coming out very obviously is cloud as that transport mechanism for us to achieve some of these changes across the organization, from enabling business all the way till operational efficiency. So cloud gives you that agility, cloud gives you that kind of scale, cloud gives you that spend model from CapEx to OpEx, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So we see that cloud is the key platform and data is the currency. I think this is the thing that George uses a lot in his presentation. So cloud along with data, intelligent data is how I'll say it, not just data, is where we are seeing a huge shift happening across the enterprise, right? I'm going to present two more slides after this, and then I'll pause and see whether you guys are hearing the same, and so on, right? So now double clicking a little bit on the overall theme, as I talked about, there is a changing business landscape. Customers are looking at hybrid, I will not say hybrid storage, but hybrid architecture, which involves storage and compute. There is a lot more requirement around cloud operations kind of capability. Customers want to know where their VMs are running, where their containers are running, what is the financial cost, and everyone is talking about multi-cloud hybrid strategy, right? Which is multiple hyperscalers depending upon their needs, because each hyperscaler has something a little bit unique about them, and then still continuing to utilize your data center for certain kinds of applications. So there's a lot more demand coming in terms of this hybrid strategy, right? That's the changing business landscape. And as I said, customers are looking at different ways of running their business, right? Like the OpEx versus CapEx, right? Which is your on-prem versus the cloud models. They want everything as a service model, right? They don't want to pay upfront for everything. As their demand increases, they want to go with pay as you go. They want to try out trials in the cloud. They want to look at consumption model. So these are the different financial, for lack of a better word, models that the business and the customers are asking all vendors, people like NetApp and Salesforce.coms and the Oracles of the world, to provide with those kind of options. So that's another big change that's happening across the customers. The other mechanism is gone are those days where you have this very lengthy cycles where they work with our channel team, with our direct sales team, or the partner, sorry, not channels, and long cycles of creating a code and opportunity. I think there's a rapid change that's happening out there where everyone wants cloud-like model, where pretty much they want to utilize their credit card or their quick PO process and saying, I want CVS, I want Cloud Insight, and I want to start utilizing it starting tomorrow, right? I think that's the kind of model that the customers are asking us to provide, all of us, right? All of the service providers and software vendors and so on. While doing that, I think the other key thing, which is very critical for NetApp to think about too, is a lot of leaders, business and CIOs, they are talking in terms of outcomes and capabilities. They're not talking about, I need 2 terabyte in my data center. What they are talking about, going back to the big digital transformation I'm talking about, they are talking in terms of, I want to enable marketing to do X. I want to have a very fluid commerce platform for selling, right? I think they are the CIOs and the VPs of business, they're talking along that language. For us at NetApp, we need to understand how do you take that language and translate that into solution and offering on our side, right? So, but again, the key message here is that there's a lot more focus on outcomes versus storage and capacity and networking. So that's the big shift that's happening. And along the same lines, they are looking at different kind of tool for managing their day-to-day activity between front office and back office and so on. Now, before I talk about along the same paradigm, what does that mean for internally in NetApp? I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions that people have either on chat or want to ask the question.
I don't believe we have anything yet.
All right. Okay, cool. Yeah. Anytime you think of a question, please stop me in the middle of a sentence. That's fine. And we can go back also to previous slides and talk through that. All right. So I'll continue with the presentation. Again, do another logical pause after a couple of slides. So in terms of, so we talked about what's happening in general, what's happening with our customers and what their expectations are. Now I'm going to go a view inside NetApp around how in IT, all these things that I talked about are sort of connected, okay? So inside IT, one of the things that we are very much focused on is how do we enable our cloud business with rapid solutions that they are coming up with the right tools and technology in the background. At the same time, we still have a huge business with the core, selling into the data centers and so on with hybrid strategy. There are constant changes that are required, right? And then our ability to co-sell both core and cloud products seamlessly to our customer is one of the biggest problem statement or business expectation for IT, right? So that's one of the thing, aka going back to digital transformation. So that's our digital transformation, is how do we provide solutions so that way we can sell seamlessly core and cloud product through our hyperscalers, through direct selling, and through our partner network. I think that's one of the things that we're looking at. While doing that, going back to the data aspect, there is more and more demand around, can we come up with more intelligent AI and ML models for forecasting, pipelines, booking information? So there is a lot of demand coming our way around providing data and analytics to our end users, our sales and finance organization, so that way they can make intelligent decision around what model works, what should be the pricing model, and so on, right? So that's what's happening inside NetApp in line with the theme that's happening across the organization. While doing this thing, there is huge focus around control and compliance, because one of the big challenge with cloud is it's very easy to lose your data, right, between your SaaS solution and your hyperscalers. And that is not acceptable in the new world. While agility is being expected of all of us, there is a lot of demand around control and compliance. So this is where a lot of NetApp products come in, and we can talk through that at a very high level. So this is one of the things which is on top of mind for a lot of CIOs and CISOs, is with this move to cloud, how do you provide the data governance and security controls? Ransomware protection is another great example. So that is one of the things that we in NetApp IT are trying to balance while looking at agility and the compliance. The next one I think is very interesting one. I think this is the most confusing and controversial topic, is around so-called cost neutral. Cloud is not cheap. Cloud will not be cheap. Cloud will always be expensive as compared to your own data center, because what happens is with your data center, when you build it, there is a lot of capitalization that you do over a period of time, and there's a lot of hardware they are running end of life, end of service, including NetApp products. So the customers don't have to pay for renewing and renewals. So in general, if you look at an IT organization, there's a lot of quote unquote efficiencies that you gain by having your data center. Moving to cloud pretty much is, if you don't renew, your data is gone, your software is gone. So the customers are forced to continue to pay, which is good as we as NetApp vendors. But I think the call out here is that cloud is going to be expensive. However, you offset the cost increase, right? Try to make it as neutral as possible by utilizing the cloud characteristics. So for example, today at NetApp IT, we have got multiple servers that run dev and stage instances. So these instances may be utilized once a month, once a quarter, but they are running, they are consuming energy, and they're taking up space. Whereas in the cloud world, you can figure out this instance of dev is required from January to February. After that, it's not required till August to September. So you can design in such a way that you get charged only for those time period, thereby saving the cost between the period where you're not using it. That's one aspect. Second aspect is that as you start moving to cloud, a lot of the day-to-day operations around managing the volumes, managing the databases, some of those activities get outsourced. So that way you don't need the same kind of personnel to manage the day-to-day activity. So that helps with your cost neutral aspect too. And then while doing this thing, one of the things that's what we are trying to do at NetApp to IT. The other key thing to think about as we're doing that is the organizational shift that's required. Cloud needs new way of thinking, and it requires new skills. So that's another thing that the CIOs always worry about, or not worry about, try to balance, is as we're shifting, how do we ensure that we upskill our employees and ensure that we have the right skill set to manage this application of the cloud? So that's pretty much is the NetApp IT problem statement. And what we tried to do was, before starting on this so-called cloud journey, there was a lot of confusion, and I see that confusion even today inside NetApp, and I talk to our different stakeholders and teams, is the so-called definition of cloud, right? What does cloud mean? So we in NetApp try to put a definition, which is sort of in line with what Gartner is. So when you think about cloud as a term, it consists predominantly of three components, or three boxes, for lack of a better word. One is SaaS, which is essentially a software that's running in the cloud, and you consume the software. You don't have to worry which hyperscaler is running on, what's the underlying technology, because even the technology is abstracted. You work in a very abstracted language that the SaaS providers come up with, right? So that's one big chunk of cloud. And for a typical IT organization, we'll talk about the stats. Most of our work is in the SaaS space, right? This is where we figure out how to come up with this co-selling model of core and cloud. How do we come up with analytics and AI and those kind of things? So that falls in the SaaS bucket. Then the second bucket of cloud is what's called as the public cloud strategy. So essentially what happens is every IT organization cannot solve all the problems with SaaS. You need to write custom code, aka the special or the secret sauce for an organization. So that's what you try to do with these custom applications. And those custom applications you can run in public cloud, provided it meets certain characteristic, meaning there are no PII kind of challenges. There's all the encryption built out. The application is not very chatty, meaning it doesn't have to connect to your data center to move the data. So those are the applications, they fall in what we call as the public cloud custom applications. Then an extension to that then is going back to our hybrid strategy. Whatever remains out of this are custom application or maybe package application that's going to remain on-prem. Now, over there, what we are saying is that the applications that are going to remain on-prem, you can't keep them as is, because even those applications need to have cloud-like characteristic, right? Meaning when there's new demand comes in, it should be able to scale. It should be able to meet the business demand in a very dynamic way. So that's what we call as private cloud, right? So the combination of this, the three components, is what we call as cloud, right? So again, hopefully that gives you guys the same kind of reference. And before I go to the next slide, any questions on the definition of cloud? Is that something that resonates with everyone?
Yeah, it works for me.
All right. Again, any questions, stop me. So as I was saying, for us, the cloud journey, as I was talking about, which is the SaaS plus public cloud, is all. Oh, sorry, I think there's a question. Klaus, go ahead. I think Klaus, you might be on mute. I saw a raised hand, at least on my screen. All right, if not, you can type your question on chat. So as I was saying, for us, the IT cloud journey, we started defining what cloud means first. And then for us, as I said, us in IT, NetApp IT, and typically for most of the IT organization, for any given business problem, the first thing we try to figure out is there a SaaS solution available? If the SaaS solution is available, we just swipe our credit card, we start utilizing it, we build integration, and so on. But if you figure out that this business process, right, it can be something special where we're trying to do very unique to differentiate ourselves from our competition, for those kind of business capability that doesn't exist in a SaaS solution, we start figuring out, hey, I need to build custom application. This is where we start now talking about how you use hyperscaler, how you use NetApp products to build that solution out, provided it doesn't make sense for it to be done on on-prem application, right? And as I said, the focus for us around IT cloud strategy and accelerating our strategy is to look at our operations and expenses and come up with an optimal way of delivering the cloud outcomes. So that's where we started. And I think this is one of the slides that I think if you've been here at NetApp for a while, you might have seen it multiple times presented. The approach that we took is, and this is true for a lot of IT organization, is how do you start, right? How do you start your cloud journey? Always the conversation should start with what's the business value right? And then on the IT side, what are the operational and technical component, including risk? So those are the two quadrants that you look at. And then based upon those two parameters, you sort of start identifying application, which bucket they fall into, right? If there is an application which does, I don't know, case creation or opportunity creation as an example, it provides the highest business value. And let's say if it's on the latest and greatest platform, so you continue to invest in that platform. Whereas if there is an application hardly used by anyone, but it does provide certain value to the business, right? Because it's critical for maybe month end, year end, not critical during regular days. Those are the applications we say, hey, I'm going to migrate that and make it cloud aware. So that way, when during non-peak hours, I can get some operational efficiency, right? During peak hours, I can figure out how to migrate and auto scale. So that falls in the migrate. And then tolerate and eliminate are usually applications that's hardly used, has got a risk to the IT function. So those are the kind of application you figure out whether you eliminate them or you keep them, containerize those application and run it in somewhere hyperscaler. So that's the step one that typically you start from. So once you figure that out, then for the application that falls in that invest and migrate bucket, you start looking at different aspects. One is cost. Other is how many priorities do you have that you can work on? Because if you look at the graph on the right side, there are different ways you design or refactor your application in the cloud. One simple thing is you take a bunch of application and migrate that as is to the cloud, right? Which we call as rehost and refactor. That's predominantly focused around cost efficiency, right? Hey, I want to reduce my cost. Let me move that into the cloud as is and not do anything. Then there are little more expensive solution over that where it falls in that invest bucket, meaning this application is running on-prem, it's expecting a lot of changes. It cannot be solved with SaaS. Let me completely redesign the application using things that you hear, API, microservices architecture, cloud aware and cloud native, so that way it can scale. Those are the applications that falls on the second bucket, the re-architect and rebuild. These are significantly expensive applications, meaning in terms of cost, but they do provide a lot of value. And the other side of the spectrum is we build something custom, doesn't make sense. There is already a SaaS solution out there. Let me migrate to SaaS. So that's the other side of the spectrum where the effort might be medium, but you have to pay upfront because someone built the software for you to consume. So that's your SaaS solution, right? So that is the spectrum of effort and complication when we start looking at cloud. And that's the approach that we took at NetApp, looking at all of our application around tolerate, invest, migrate, eliminate, and then coming up with the strategy. So with that, I will say that this numbers that you guys are going to see here is very consistent. I was at Gartner and I was chatting with a bunch of CIOs and chief EAs, and I was trying to bounce these numbers by them just to see whether we are on the right track, and also at the same time with Gartner. So essentially, in the next, I will say 2+ years, maybe not even 3 years, what we will see is that, again, this is all net IT workloads. I'm not talking about engineering workloads. 80% of the IT workloads are going to be running in the cloud, and about 20+% is going to remain on the data center. And then there is a need for a hybrid strategy for these applications to talk to each other or move the data back and forth. Right? That's our hybrid platform aspect, which is acts as a glue between your public cloud and your private cloud. So that's the 80-20 kind of rule. And the 80%, again, the key thing being the context. The context here is IT functions, not engineering functions. Engineering, it might be the other way around, 20-80 maybe. The 70% of the workloads are going to be in SaaS. This is your Oracle, SAP, Salesforce of the world. 10% of the application, I call as the custom application, will be running on our hyperscaler, Azure and ANF and so on, and AWS. And then about 15-20% are going to remain on-prem for various reasons, right? And this is how we think the target is going to be. As we speak today, at NetApp IT, 42% of our applications are running in cloud, which is this box on the left, and about 60% is running on-prem. And we have a cloud strategy to move get to this 80-20 target within the next 2 to 3 years. So at a very high level, this is how the composition looks like. And after this, I'm going to pause to see if there are any questions. Some workload characteristics around how and what kind of application fall in each of this bucket. So 70% SaaS, these are your commodity services. These are your CRM systems, your HCM systems, your ERP systems, by the way, are running in SaaS model. So that fits in that bucket. The 10% cloud and the 15% private cloud, 10% public cloud and 15% private cloud. Typically, these applications are workloads or application, right? I think we should talk in terms of applications versus workload because that's what resonates to the CIOs and so on, is things that are unique for the enterprise, things where you want to try something really rapidly, figure out whether it works, if not stop working on that one, and anything which is custom application. Those are the kind of application that you try to build utilizing your public cloud and private cloud combination. Then the 5% of the application are your tolerated apps. These are very old software that no one wants to touch around because people are scared if they modify it, it's gonna, all hell is gonna break loose kind of situation. So you say, I'm not gonna mess around with this thing. Someday this application is going to go away. So I'm just going to put it in a container. I'm going to run it in my data center, right? So that's your tolerated apps. So that's what sort of this application falls or across this 80-20 or 70-10, 15-5 kind of category. Any questions on this percentages? I think there was a chat, Mark, I believe, from, oh, any questions from anyone? All right. If not, in the interest of time, let me go through a couple more data points. I'm not sure how much of this is going to be helpful, but we thought we'll share some of the characteristics of applications in NetApp IT. I'm not sure whether this is typical for any IT organization or not, but at least for us, we have the small, medium, large kind of VMs. I think small is less than 5, medium is 5 to 15 VMs with about less than terabyte of storage required for running an application, and large falls in greater than 15 VMs, greater than 10 terabytes. This is typically your ERP and Cottage on-prem application. So we are about like 8% of small applications, 7% in medium, 75 in large. The reason why I shared this number is the effort for migrating to cloud is sort of also is dependent upon the size of the application, because this small, medium, large indicates the complexity of the application that you have to redesign to make it work in the cloud, if the target is cloud, right? So I think that's, I thought this might be an interesting stats for us to share. So this is the current volume. In terms of going back to our 80-20 percentages, this is how NetApp IT's landscape is going to evolve in the next 2, at the most 3 years. Is we are expecting about 40-ish% of our application running on AWS with FSxN and with Azure ANF combination. So those are the two offerings that we have inside NetApp IT for all our development team. So we're expecting about 40% of our workload going over to that architecture. Then we might look at other offerings, for example, niche cloud offering, like as an example, right? Like Oracle Cloud. If it makes sense, we might take a look at that. If SAP Cloud has certain offering, which it makes sense, which is very specific for a given business, if it makes sense, we might take a look at that. But again, we are still not sure yet. We think about 10% of our workload might go there, but this 40 plus or 50 plus percentage of application are going to be running in the public cloud option. While doing this thing, one of our key goal, as I said, is we have lots of VMs that are not being utilized or underutilized. So we'll go have an aggressive plan around reducing those applications, right? And the storage that comes with that one. That results in then about 20+% of application remaining on-prem. And as I said, about 16% of the current portfolio will be moving to the cloud. This is whatever is remaining on-prem. When you add all that stuff up, it goes to that 80-20%. So this is where NetApp IT is at this point of time around our targets for custom and SaaS applications. Before I go there, I think this might be the last slide, and I got one more slide after this. Any questions around our targets and why we are picking it. I think AWS and Azure, AWS was easy to start and they were the leader, and hence in NetApp IT we started with AWS, and then Azure is catching up in terms of offerings. So that's the reason we have got new offering coming onto Azure. But between AWS and Azure is how we are looking at our strategy. GCP is definitely a very interesting use case, and we currently don't have a footprint is because adding another hyperscaler should result in some kind of efficiency gain for us, which we are trying to figure out. Why do we need 3 hyperscaler? Is 2 good enough? Is the kind of discussion we're having. And also typically a lot of customers, they go the GCP route predominantly, right? We went with AWS as a predominant offering because of our understanding and ease of use of AWS. A lot of customers go on to GCP if they have got a lot of AI and ML kind of workloads, right? If their application portfolio is heavy on data processing and number crunching, they go the GCP route as a first option, and then they have an alternate option. For us, it was ease of use with AWS and familiarity, so we started with AWS and with Azure as a second option. So that's the reasoning behind AWS and Azure. Any questions on this one? All right. So I think we'll go through the next level detail. And again, Praveen, if you can then stand by to answer any questions around some of this products offering, right? So this is one of the views that you will start saying, that will start sharing more and more, which talks about how in NetApp IT, and for that matter, any typical IT organization can utilize the NetApp products for building that 10 plus 5% thing that I talked about, 10 plus 15, right? Which is that out of 80%, 70% is SaaS, 10% public cloud, 15% private cloud. So I'm talking about the 10 plus 15 target area, right? Ignoring the 5% package, keep as is. So this architecture addresses how you can enable that 10 plus 15% of the application portfolio. But that doesn't mean that we don't have anything in the SaaS space, right? There are offerings coming up in that SaaS space. So I'm going to pause here for a second before I talk about this. So one of the interesting things we are noticing is platforms like Snowflake, as an example, which I put in the platform category versus a SaaS category. They are realizing that building a data warehouse, still Snowflake is a data warehouse which runs in the cloud, predominant in the cloud, but they are realizing that the hybrid is the way to go. Not all their customers like to move their data to public cloud. They want to keep some data within their data center. But when you're running analytics, you're running analytics across enterprise, irrespective of where the data is residing, public cloud or private cloud. So I believe that there was an announcement around Snowflake talking about a mechanism by which they can connect to on-prem data, so that way they can seamlessly run analytics on top of that. So what we're noticing is that slowly in the PaaS and the SaaS space, there is demand coming for NetApp-based solution to bridge the gap between public and private cloud, right? Even though I said SaaS is 70%, that's something that is outside of realm, but there are developments happening, especially with the hybrid cloud strategy being the strategy for everyone. We are getting a lot of interesting kind of use cases coming along those lines. So just a FYI on that topic. Now, getting back to the 25% workloads, this is how we have designed our architecture. So at a high level, so we said SaaS is SaaS. We're not going to talk too much about that. And our focus is going to be around hybrid strategy, which is the bottom, which is the data center, the private cloud, and utilizing the public cloud for enabling that 25% of the workload. And over there, again, we look from an on-prem and cloud and the hybrid perspective. So some of the component, right, that we're utilizing is in the cloud world, public cloud, as we're building the application, we need to be able to figure out where our containers are, where our VMs are, and we should be able to have a way to start, stop, restart, and manage those instances, the compute instances. So the NetApp offering of Elastic Group and Ocean helps you manage, create your containers, including the AWS instances seamlessly, right? So we utilize that as part of what we call as our Cloud One, which is our platform for managing the AWS and the Spot instances. On-prem side, we are doing convergence onto FlexSpot. And again, Praveen can answer more details around why and so on. but a lot of compute convergence is happening onto FlexPod for the on-prem. So that's our compute aspect between cloud and on-prem. On the storage side, we are utilizing FSXN and ANF and CBS for applications, right? Database storage and other and database kind of applications. So the storage is all on FSXN and ANF. And on-prem, we have got storage grade, E-series, and so on. And then we utilize ONTAP features to act as that hybrid strategy for moving the data between cloud and on-prem, right? And I'll talk about Cloud Sync in a minute. So storage is all through ANF, FSX, and then ONTAP acting as the glue. Now, the other thing that at the very beginning I talked about for CIOs, what's one other thing that they're worried about is about cost and cost optimization. So when you're running applications in cloud, it becomes very easy to have runaway applications, taking away all your compute, overutilizing and oversubscribing to storage and compute. So Cloud Checker helps us with the finance ops aspect of that one, along with Cloud Insights providing that control plane across all your operational activity. So I think Cloud Insight is a very powerful kind of tool for IT operations team to manage the financial aspect and the day-to-day operational aspect. InstaCluster, we are a big fan of InstaCluster because that helps us with a lot of DB management of open source technology and other technologies. So InstaCluster is something that we are heavily utilizing inside NetApp as part of our database management activities. So that's the operations angle. And then around data services, cloud backup, data tiering, those are some of the day-to-day activities that are required for managing and maintaining any kind of custom application. Without that, I think you get into a lot of trouble, especially when everything is running in the cloud. You need to have a very robust backup and restore strategy for the cloud application. And on the on-prem side, I think you guys are all aware around NetApp Snap Center for taking snapshots of application versus volumes, and Snap Vault for your ransomware protection and those kind of capabilities. And then Cloud Sync for moving the data from on-prem to cloud. This is the whole hybrid strategy we're talking about. So putting it all together, this is what the architecture looks like for the 25% of applications that I was talking about. So this is where we are in terms of our own cloud journey, our targets, our architecture, and how we are utilizing some of the NetApp products for achieving our cloud goal. Right. Before I talk about closing, I'm going to pause here since we have about 14 minutes left and open up for questions before we summarize the presentation. Any comments? Maybe not questions. Any comments, maybe?
Rajesh, I have a question. We've talked a lot about what digital transformation means to different organizations. When do you feel like an organization is ready to move to optimization? Are there some like telltale that your organization is ready for the next step in digital transformation?
I think that's a great question, and let me see if I can make an attempt. My view, right? And I was at the Gartner conference last week, I think, or something, or maybe 2 weeks ago, where one of the themes that they talked about is CEOs and CIOs having digital transformation fatigue, right? So, which I think is exactly the question that you're talking about, is when do you move from transformation to more of optimization? I don't think there is one right answer for that one, right? If you ask me, are we at an optimization phase? I think we are sort of towards that. So I'll give very specific about what's happening inside NetApp. So inside NetApp right now, we have 5 major initiatives. It's called as Big 3, but it's actually Big 5, depending upon if you talk to CEO staff, they say Big 3. If you talk to CIO staff, we say Big 5. And I call that as transformation, right? So what I mean by that is, so we are coming up with a unified selling model, right? AKA the project is CRM project. We are completely optimizing our pricing, quoting, and subscription offerings. The project is CPQ, Configure Price Quote Project. We have signed off, we got the board approval now to completely overhaul our back office, which is our ERP systems, for lack of a better word. So that's our big three that the CEO staff has identified, has been communicated across all of NetApp and so on, right? So that's transformational activities. Then there is two other initiatives that we are working on. One is strategic, which is we're taking our data warehouse, which is running on-prem, and completely overhauling and moving it into Snowflake, which is in the cloud, along with transformation and analytics capability and so on. So those are strategic. So to answer your question, those are the foundational blocks. So when you talk to customers, if they are on that journey, they're pretty much changing their foundation, aka transforming. Then the last one is this cloud migration effort, right? For lack of a better word. I call that in the optimization bucket, which is more about, hey, we are doing this massive changes. While doing that thing, we need some amount of agility and we need some operational efficiency. So that is this cloud migration effort I put in the operational bucket. So at NetApp, we are sort of in that area where there is transformation happening and there are some operational kind of thing happening. It's very difficult to say telltale sign is a organization the transformation phase or an operationalization phase. But I think most of the companies, if they're talking about changing this foundational blocks for changing their business, changing the new revenue, coming with new revenue models, I will say they're in the transformation bucket. If they're talking about cost optimization, efficiency, they are in that optimization bucket. This is again my view. Because right now everything is lumped as digital transformation, so that's what is causing the CEO and CIO digital transformation fatigue, as Gartner calls it. Hopefully that gives an answer. Again, that's just my view.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks for that. All right. Not seeing any other questions. So with that, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is a really fantastic conversation. And I hope everyone who sees this gets as much out of it as I did.
Yeah. And if there are any follow-up question, Mark, I think you can always send emails, because last time after the presentation, I got at least like 5 to 10 emails asking specifics, and then some conversations with customers where they wanted a perspective. So same format, if you have any questions or if you're interacting with a customer and you want to get some more details, please reach out to Mark, myself, Paul, Matt Brown, and we can definitely help you out. All right. With that, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Everyone
everyone.
have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.